Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, March 25th, 2020, and I guess I got to start with this breaking news, which pops up on my Twitter homepage. Prince Charles, that's England, everybody, in case you weren't following. Prince Charles tests positive for coronavirus. A lot of handshaking, part of the job. Elderly, well, relatively speaking. He's 71. I mean, I don't want to say elderly because, hi, Mom. Hope you're not listening to the show today. But okay, in the risk group. I don't know what else to say. It's probably just a bunch of, it's the handshaking, I guess, and being out in public. And I don't know whether the British royals were likely to give that up at any point. Anyway, I mean, I guess as a good example to others, but, this may have happened. He may have contracted the virus some time ago before everybody really was catching on to what we needed to do in order to avoid it. Not because people weren't saying what we needed to do in order to avoid it, but because people weren't really yet catching on to the idea that it was really true, that it was a big deal and you could avoid it. Or you could make a good attempt at it. Anyway, who knows? Tough life as it is. I mean, not bad for a billionaire, quite honestly. But I don't know. I feel bad about that one. Watching The Crown is making me feel a lot better about the royal family in general. And Prince Charles, perhaps, in particular. So bad news there. Bad luck, really, for the world. Prince Charles gets it and Donald Trump doesn't. At least, not reportedly, anyway. I still believe he's an asymptomatic supercarrier myself, and there's more evidence of that. Even his name is a supercarrier. Apparently, yet another party that took place at one of his properties, this time one at which he was not present. I haven't heard about him spending any time at his Los Angeles golf club just yet. But at any rate, apparently another birthday party for some figure or another, apparently one of the former mayors of Los Angeles. Held at a Trump property, a golf property in the Los Angeles area, and, well, everybody came away with coronavirus, and including the guest of honor, which really kind of sucks, I guess, although I don't know anything. I guess at this point we need to be personally evaluating everybody this is really not a good idea, actually. But, and soon Greg will be here, and he's a doctor, and he knows you don't personally evaluate people and say, it's okay for you to get the virus because you're a jerk. Whereas you're a nice person, or I agree with you shouldn't get the virus. That's not really the way it's supposed to work. But I'm just trying to adapt to Trumpian times. And maybe I shouldn't sink to his level, but maybe I was already there. I don't know. At any rate, that's in the news as well. I'll grab that and include it in the roundup. I think that's just, you'll have to search my tweets for that one and see if we can't find information on that. Okay, let me click this one open and get to the story. I don't know. It's one of those strange moments or something in Twitter. And so I don't know if I have any actual articles on it. We'll have to dig that up. All right. Sooner than later, it's probably better for us to turn things over to Greg. He's calling in early because he's hearing me damn people to coronavirus diagnoses. And I should get away from that. Except, can anyone really get away from it? I don't think so. All right. Let's find out what's new. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning. How you doing today?
So far, so good. We had a big story about Connecticut super spreaders yesterday.
Yeah, well, it happens.
Yeah, wasn't you.
It wasn't me.
You washed your hands. I knew.
I wash my hands a lot.
Right.
We're opening up the college dorms so that the docs and nurses can stay there in case they wind up on shift all the time so they can stay away from their families.
That's a good idea. We can't do that with Liberty University, apparently.
No, they're going to go back and basically become super spreaders.
Cool.
And then, I think Liberty University is probably going to use the time back to study the plagues, and they're going to try to figure out which one this fits in.
Right.
Pestilence, I think, maybe.
Right. Well, at least Jerry fits in as pestilence. They did try to open, and they were going to try and go back full blast, and the governor said no way. And apparently now they're all going to come back to campus and have online classes, after which they'll say, this is stupid, let's go home.
So let's do a little bit of polling there, because I think it sort of covers that point a little bit. And, during the pundit roundup today, when I put it together, one of the things that I wanted to highlight are the political scientists who are basically saying don't pay any attention to a Trump bump in the polls. It's ephemeral, meaningless, and actually not all that big. For example, in the Civics tracker,
yes,
Trump's net negative has gone from -12 all the way to -9.
Net negative.
Right. His job approval is 44. His disapproval is 53.
Okay.
Which is only 9 points to the negative, and it used to be as high as 12. One time I think it even got to 13. Is that significant? Let's just say that right after 9/11, George W. Bush was running like 90%.
Yes. Right.
It's not like all of a sudden everybody loved him, but there's this rally around the president with a crisis, and it's fascinating that Trump isn't there. But, and all of this is right there on the front page of Daily Kos. If you're looking for the government response, Civics is tracking that as well, current response to the coronavirus outbreak.
Okay.
And it turns out 39% are not satisfied at all.
Well.
17% not very satisfied. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's, 56? And then 22% mostly satisfied and 18% completely satisfied. And that 18% is dropping.
Okay.
It was as high as 25% before the stock market crash. So people are sort of, getting information from other than Fox News. And in fact, what's happening is that people are beginning to realize that, hey, this is a big deal. Now, you could even, if you want to, take that one step further, and you can look state by state.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
And there are very few states which are totally fine with it overall. But if you look, for example, let's find one that is fine with it. That would be North Dakota.
Oh, well,
that's about the only one.
Yeah, they have some distance.
Democrats 59% extremely concerned. Independents are 37% extremely concerned and 32% moderately concerned, which I think is about right. It's about 60% moderately concerned. And for independents, only 9% are not concerned at all. Republicans even, only 15% are not concerned at all. So that gives you a little bit of nuance. But Nick Orovich, polling has, for a Navigator, actually has some really, really interesting nuance here. For example, he has day 2 of what's a Navigator survey tracking poll, just like Civics. Only they're in the second day. The majority of the public describes Trump's response to the pandemic as unprepared, 61%, chaotic, 54%, but also serious, 57%. Now, how can you think that Trump is unprepared and chaotic but serious? Because he has Tony Fauci standing on stage with him. Okay. And so, to me, Fauci's the one person in America. I was having this discussion with some of my online friends on Twitter. He's not like John Kelly or, name your figure who's going to be the adult in the room. He's more like Bob Mueller. You can't fire him.
Yeah.
Fauci can say whatever he wants, and Trump cannot afford at this particular point in time to fire him. And why is that? Well, here's a great Washington Post story explaining why. This title is At the Capitol, Palpable Fear from a More Insidious Enemy Than Past Crises. And they're talking about how scared senators are. And then they have this one line, which I pulled and tweeted before. Any of them could have the deadly virus, and they all know it now. That's because Rand Paul is a professional jerk.
Yes.
And, tried to justify playing nonchalant and getting everybody infected.
Right.
So he may have done the country a service by focusing the attention of the Senate on the seriousness of what's going on here, and that they themselves are not immune. And they're going to wind up leaving the Senate now that the $1 trillion several $trillion rescue package has been passed, and go home and find that they can't escape it there either, and that people expect them to actually lead, which is not really what they're used to at all. They are not used to using nonpartisan means to get stuff done. It's been like a decade since they did that. And they're not used to actually mingling with the little people, since they're so used to their own personal power protecting them in every way, shape, and form. That's why the Senate gym was open in the first place, which is why Rand Paul could infect everybody else.
Yes.
Now, of course, with Mitt Romney testing negative and Trump being obnoxious about it on Twitter, that's kind of a side story, but that's not really the story at all. The Senate knows that they have to act, and in fact, they did, and so stuff happened after that. Now, David Lauder from LA Times points out, what did the Democrats get by holding out for several days an economic rescue bill? Increase in unemployment payments for 4 months. Inspector General and congressional oversight on a $500 billion bailout fund, increased dollars for hospitals and local governments, topped the list. Mm-hmm. So it was well worth holding out to get those things. And Republicans were furious about it for a couple of different reasons. What happened is that because they were so stupid about it, and this was a complete misplay by McConnell, I think we talked about this on Monday, but things, every year is like a day, so I don't even remember anymore. But McConnell forego the four-corner discussion with McCarthy and Pelosi himself and Schumer and went only for Republican senators, and they came up with a stupid deal. And the Democrats said, we're not having any of it. And Republicans say, you have to. And the Democrats said, no, we don't. And then the Republicans threw a hissy fit. Mm-hmm. And McConnell started just lambasting everybody. And while this was going on, everybody ignored him. Everybody, I mean, Mnuchin and Schumer negotiated what to do. And then they came up with something. McConnell had no choice but to go along with it. Mm-hmm. And that's why there's a deal. And so McConnell was completely shut out of the negotiations. And Democrats got what they wanted. And, it's a reminder of a piece I had on the Pundit Roundup from Stan Greenberg today, which basically said Democrats have a lot more power than they think. They just don't realize it.
Yeah, that does frequently happen.
It does frequently happen, and so that's what happened this time. And, in fact, it was extremely effective.
Okay. Well, still some disagreement among the rank and file about whether they should have held out longer or gotten more, but it's an awfully difficult thing.
Everybody's going to be unhappy with this. At some point, just suck it up and pass the damn bill and go home and get out of there before you get a virus and die. I mean, that's basically the impetus. It kind of focuses you.
Yeah, I mean, that is a true thing. We keep mentioning you can't negotiate with a virus, and there's a third player at the table here, a virus that will
the invisible
kill you
enemy.
You come up with something. Oh, yeah. True, and maybe one of his better turns of phrase that he borrowed.
Well, only that he wants to play the war president, but he can't. Yeah. Anyway, back to Nick Gorovich. Uh-huh. So when you use those terms and realize that people have a very clear idea that Trump bumbled and stumbled this, but still want him to succeed, that's why you get the numbers that you're getting right now. Don't take it to the bank in terms of what that means in November. The other point that Nick Gorovich made is he found that 74% of voters support a national quarantine, which suggests that neither the public nor the state and local elected officials will comply with a Trump, quote, order, end quote, to kill us all, or reopen the economy is how he put it.
Yes.
Here's the deal, folks. Okay? No malarkey. You have to shut down for another 2 or 3 weeks. You don't have any choice. The only nuance here is that states that don't have a lot of virus at this point can wait a week, compared to, let's say, New York, Connecticut, California, Colorado, and other places that are testing 13% positive of those they test. Mm. All right? The virus is here. You have to shut down. If Trump says don't, you still have to shut down. If Trump says don't, people are going to ignore him. Yes. Why? Because we'll be Italy and we'll all die.
Okay. I have boiled it down to F Trump, just don't go.
Pretty much. That should be true for the press conferences. He had a really short one yesterday that hardly anybody covered, and not a lot of people did it live. Great plan. Okay, and they're going to ignore him when he tells people to shut down. It's the wrong thing to do. And you know where this is coming from when you see stories in the papers about why did Trump decide to do this? Well, he talked to the Chamber of Commerce, and also he talked to his son-in-law. And Jared told him that there are Silicon Valley firms and venture capitalists who are telling Jared, who told Trump, that novel treatments for coronavirus are coming in the pipeline. Therefore, you can go ahead and do that, because if you get sick, we'll have treatment.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
in other
Jared's
words,
pretty good.
He's an idiot listening to an idiot.
Other thing, right? Opposite.
And that is so clear to everybody. That's why Fauci is starting to contradict them in public.
Yeah, he's really. Yeah, I'm curious to see. I know you say he sort of can't be fired. Can't be silenced. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Even if you fire him, he'll say, "Okay, fine, fire me." But this is what's going on. And guess what? I'll have a press conference every day, and you'll come and you'll listen to me. And now I can talk about what I really want to talk about.
And that would be okay.
And by the way, I'll tell you how Trump screwed up. You want that? Go ahead, fire me.
Okay. Or we should maybe encourage him with that line. Have Trump. You don't work for him. Don't go to his press conferences anymore. Do your own thing. Right.
Debbie Birx has been a much bigger disappointment. Yes. But that's not necessarily because she's a bureaucrat who knows how to navigate. It's that she's putting out false information at times. Now, testing, which she has been mostly talking about, is in fact ramping up. We're doing a lot of testing. We're up to 50,000 tests a day. We need to be at about 100,000. The CDC has screwed up royally on the testing as well as the mask question. They're not really giving the public guidance that people feel confident in.
Royally is for real now. Yes.
Royal's for real because Prince Charles has it.
Yeah.
And so the big stories this morning is Prince Charles has it for those who are celebrity watchers, and at the same time, the Congress passed this bill. But the struggle over when and whether to open things is just so nakedly power politics. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's clear that Trump is trying to make a play for his conservative evangelical base by touting Easter and resurrection as the time to open the country.
Ta-da.
There's no other reason to do that or pick that date or make those claims. And just like Liberty University, he will tell his base who wants to hear something what they want to hear, and it'll work for a while until Trump University people start suing him. Only in this case, they'll die.
Yes, so their states will.
And once they die, they're not voting for him. So you've lost that whole demographic for Fox. So I don't totally get it as a business model, but I wish I were being hyperbolic about this, but I'm not.
No.
And so that's why local and state people aren't going to listen to this.
Okay. I hope that is true.
Well, you were telling me about Liberty University and opening and not opening, and local people said maybe not, and that's how it works.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, Liberty University gets to open if people believe that it's better for them to not lose their job operating the dorms and dining halls and as faculty than the chances of their contracting and spreading the virus. So there will be people who just say, I'm not doing that, and the government of Virginia will help them, saying you can't open, you're not allowed to open, you can't do this, those gatherings are banned.
Yeah, I realize you'd like to kill yourself and your community, but frankly, we're not going to let you, is really what this is about.
The heavy hand of the government jackbooted thugs now marching in to stop you from killing.
Right. There's a couple of experts here that have written stuff that I think are worth going over. This is Scott Gottlieb from a couple days ago. Okay. And then I'll do Tom Inglesby. And they're relatively short tweet storms, and I'll just add them here. But I think they're well worth going over. There's a strong and understandable desire to return to better times in a functioning economy.
Yes.
Or as somebody put it, it's very nice that Trump is giving up your grandparents for Lent. But it should not be lost on anyone that there's no such thing as a functioning economy in society so long as coronavirus continues to spread uncontrolled in our biggest cities.
Yeah.
Older people will die in historic numbers, middle-aged folks doomed to prolonged ICU stays to fight for their lives. Hospitals will be overwhelmed, and most Americans terrified to leave homes, eat out, take the subway, or go to the park. The only way to return to a stable economy and restore our liberty and Liberty University, I would add,
Yes.
is to end epidemic spread of COVID-19. We need a massive effort to offset the hardship of these efforts, and that's what the Congress is doing, but there's no functioning healthcare with hospitals overwhelmed, no return to work with people terrified of a virus raging uncontrolled. There are two ways to end it: let a vast swath of people catch it, which is unthinkable, or break the epidemic, and we have to choose the latter. There's no easy return. We must accept a sober truth. This pathogen has altered history and changed our world, but it caught us at a time when we have the public health tools, technology, and know how to defeat it quickly and vanquish it for good. We must stay on the battlefield. Again, if you want to be a war president, you got to win the war.
True.
Not cower and say, okay, well, I changed my mind. My resolution, I have resolved. My resolution lasted about a day and a half because I spoke to Jared.
Right. Well, he went to Jared, as they say in the commercial, and that's usually a disaster now.
Right. Dr. Jens Voll points out that this is quite serious. And if you don't know how serious it is, let me just tell you, Waffle House is closing.
That's a big disaster measure. Yes.
Waffle houses never close.
Right.
Jens Voll writes. They're open 24/7, have limited menus in case of no water or no electricity or both. They were founded by World War II military men who lived to be almost 100. If a nuke went off, they'd use the gamma radiation to fry the eggs. If they close, it's a big deal.
Yes. That's true. That's true.
Right.
They're well known for staying open in the middle of craziness.
Meanwhile, Susan Demis, our friend from Michigan, who writes the blog Michigan Advance, journalist, says, and she's checked with the state on this, so she's not making it up. Without a stay-at-home order, Michigan would have been facing 460,000 coronavirus deaths. That's 0.5% of the population, not a typo. That's from a state model developed with health experts. So the epidemiologists in your state Department of Public Health model how many people in your state would die if you do nothing. They give it to the governor, and some governors pay attention and some governors pray.
Okay. Well,
Which is fine as long as you also pay attention. But Tate Reeves, for example, is not paying attention and not doing enough. And there's plenty of governors that are not doing enough. And on the Pundit Roundup, I sort of outlined a couple of different things. One of my Republican pollster friends put together a coronavirus restriction level by state map so that you can look at it and immediately see which states have restrictions and which didn't. But that wasn't helpful enough. So I asked him, and somebody else named Unmarked Bill on Twitter responded and put a red dot or a blue dot in each one of the states. So at a glance, you can tell which of the states that have restrictions and which not. And it's not strictly red-blue.
not
For
entirely
example, Mike DeWine in Ohio,
red, but
Okay.
restricted.
Indiana, also restricted. Just to give you an idea, Alabama and Georgia are having some restrictions, although Brian Kemp is fighting some of this. And Florida is having some restrictions too. Remember, they closed the beaches after everybody was infected and then went home.
Yeah, it doesn't say they have any, but okay, we know about
Well,
the
it's
beaches.
because it's updated. That's the original map, and he's revising it every day. And every time he puts this out, somebody will say, no, you missed this. We did this. It's partial.
Oh, there's new news.
So he's actually updating the map twice a week.
Yes.
But that map is one of the two that I put side by side or in the blog format, top bottom. Right underneath that is a New York Times map of where the virus is.
Yes, and they
And
have
you can
included
see
Alaska
that
and
where
Hawaii.
there's little virus, there's little restriction. There's some exceptions to that. Texas, for example. Texas has virus and has done nothing, so there's an example of like bad,
Yeehaw. That's the motto.
right? But Louisiana, which New Orleans is now going to be a hotspot because of Mardi Gras, is got the whole state under restrictions. And Arizona, no. And New Mexico, yes, but New Mexico has far fewer cases than Arizona. Go figure that. So in other
that's a
words,
red
as
blue
these cases build up, the Department of Public Health people are going to win over the governors who will say, okay, now it's time to do something. It's okay to wait a little bit, but, the whole idea is to lock down and get ahead of it.
It looks like the southern border states are pretty much following the red-blue pattern as opposed to the yes-no virus pattern. the Reds seem to be withstanding calls for restrictions, and the blue dots down there are New Mexico and Louisiana, which also have virus. So you were saying as between Arizona and New Mexico, I think the red-blue dichotomy explains that more than
it does for
virus.
now.
Yeah.
Same with Texas for now.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's not going to last.
Okay.
So some of the red state governors are going to talk to their colleagues and say, "You got to do this." And
right.
again, expect that map to change. It's already out of date, and that's why he's updating twice a week. But it's a fast-moving story, and just like the polls, it's hard to keep up with this because things change so quickly.
Yes. Also,
so the main thing here is to emphasize that the guiding principle for the White House is re-election, not public health, and not even saving the markets. He could care less about the markets.
Oh, I love the markets.
He just thinks that if they go sour, it'll hurt his election prospects, and that's the only reason he cares.
Yeah.
Because it affects him. It affects his money to a certain extent. But he doesn't really have any money, so he's not as worried about the stock market as you would think real people with money are.
I don't know. That's one of the things that he learned in the 1980s. People associate with the presidency, and it's wrong, but okay.
Dave Hopkins, a political scientist, writes, my sense is much of the Republican Party and conservative movement was quite bullish on Trump's re-election chances pre-coronavirus. And part of the increasing public frustration, you have Susan Collins pointing her finger in Chuck Schumer's face and not practicing social distancing, for example, during the debate before the bill passed. Part of the increasing public frustration with Republicans we're starting to see is a real-time processing of the prospect that Trump could well lose in November. And Sam Stein makes a similar point. At the end of the day, it's all about power. Trump and allied Republicans fear he will be hampered in his reelection with a bad economy, and that matters more than anything else. Science, hospitals, social cohesion, and human life. It's all about power. Well, that's our Republican Party, folks.
All right. Well, we can only find... all you can do is find the leverage points and see if you can make them work in your favor at this point. Again, as you said up top, we dislike the way Trump's handling it, but want him to succeed because, living. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Greg Dworkin continues with us. More yet to round up. We're
going to do a little more polling here. Again, I don't have the tweet in front of me, but Larry Sabato, political scientist, crystal ball,
that
Virginia,
guy, Twitter thing,
said basically, look,
for it.
I hope nobody's taking these polling numbers right now very seriously. They're ephemeral. They have no effect whatsoever on Trump's election in November. In a week, they'll be totally different. Don't pay too much attention. So Dave Hopkins, again, the political scientist, wrote a lovely blog. I love his blog, Honest Graft, it's called. The name of this blog honors the notable political philosopher and practitioner George Washington Plunkett, who had a wonderful quote about honest graft, But that's okay. That kind of stuff is good. It's honest graft. Makes things run. So 4 reasons to be cautious about Trump's approval ratings.
Okay.
Realistically, it's far too soon to glean much about either the American public's ultimate response to Trump's management of the pandemic or its implications for the upcoming election. Here are 4 good reasons to exercise some patience before jumping to conclusions. Number 1, political leaders' popularity often rises temporarily after the onset of a crisis. Political scientists call this pattern the rally effect, and it's been documented many times. W's approval shot up from 50 to 90 overnight.
Yes, and he sucked.
Right? Both French President Emmanuel Macron and Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte, and there's more Italian mayor stuff online, by the way, has enjoyed spikes in popularity during the current coronavirus outbreak, despite, especially in Italy's case, substantial national dislocation and tragedy. But these popularity bumps fade with time. That's why they're called bumps. Either the crisis is resolved and citizens turn their attention to other things, or it's not, in which case they start to grow impatient with the effectiveness of their leader. The 2020 general election is still far enough away that even if Trump were to benefit from the rally effect short term, it wouldn't be a reliable signal of his popularity more than 7 months in the future. Remember, Trump thinks that his entire reelection hinges on the stock market.
Okay.
Not a good sign for him.
No.
Okay, number 2, and this is the one that I keep emphasizing because I just think it's so true and people forget this. Americans are still learning about the severity and likely duration of this crisis.
True.
We're following it closely, but everybody else not necessarily so. As things close down and as they are forced to pay attention, their attitude changes. A seminal event happened yesterday. And again, I took a contrarian view to many of my progressive peeps on this. Mike Pence and Donald Trump gave one of their patented rally-style press conferences as a strictly on Fox town hall.
Okay.
Now, is your reaction good or bad to something like that?
Mine?
Yeah.
My reaction is bad.
And my reaction was fantastic.
Oh, okay. I mean, I react like, oh, there's Donald Trump. Bad.
Right. And here he is lying to his base again. Bad. This gets me angry. Bad. But
also, this gets me in trouble because I say, oh, good, he's killing those people.
But
yes,
the Fox News demographic is the one that needs to hear this. Remember, it was the villages in Florida. What's that, like 130,000 strong, where all the seniors are out there dancing and saying it's all a hoax?
Yes.
So Trump and Pence are on Fox News BSing, lying, but also saying this is serious. And as they spoke, the graphic on the side showing the number of deaths going on while Trump was speaking was really a remarkable thing. Remember, if you look at it with the sound off, those visuals, sometimes subliminal, sometimes not so much, really, really matter. In fact, I actually have that tweet because I took a screenshot of my TV because I wanted to preserve it. And there's Mike Pence speaking. And over to the right are, coronavirus around the world, 398,000 cases, 17,000 deaths, or something along those lines. In the last 24 hours, 1,000 deaths. And, you can't look at that and say it's a hoax. So this is the opportunity to actually reach the people who have been resistant to the idea that you have to take this seriously. And Pence is doing his sincere lying about it, look in the camera, I am just totally sincere when I tell you that you have to take this seriously. And Pence was on for an hour, and then Trump was on for an hour. And sure, Trump did all sorts of dancing around this stuff. But you have to take it seriously when you see something like that. And that's why you get those numbers that, oh, well, he's taking it seriously. Look, he's appearing on Fox News. And sure, you can pivot to all sorts of ways. You can dance around the fact that he didn't respond up until now. And look at him now, he's leading, whatever. The public is hearing that this is serious from a source that they will trust, even though we don't.
All right. It's worth something, that's for sure. At least one Trump-supporting person I know who drank their fish tank says they won't listen to him anymore.
Well, there used to be two.
Yes, right. The other one also changed his mind, but doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter now. Absentee voting. And it was interesting because they interviewed the survivor who really did pin Trump for, like, I heard this.
Yeah.
Well, how can you blame Trump? Because he said something and they didn't understand what he was saying any more than he did, and so they did the wrong thing, and that's, of course, on them. But the only reason they did it is because Trump brought that up.
Yeah, they were pretty clear about that.
Yeah. Now, so Americans are still learning about the severity and likely duration of this. And in terms of the severity and likely duration, every day these Goldman Sachs style predictions of what's going to happen to the economy get worse and worse and worse. And I guess we'll have unemployment stuff tomorrow.
Okay, maybe.
And so, we shall see. Trump tried to tell the states not to broadcast that before the federal number was out. And, of course, they're ignoring him like they're ignoring him with everything else. And, unemployment claims are up 10 times compared to what it was before, some record numbers. Number 3, Americans already have strong opinions about Trump, and most of them disliked him before the crisis. So they're not going to change their mind. There's nothing about this that, I really hated him up until now, but now that I know that he's killing grandma, I really like him.
It's better, yeah, sure.
That's not going to happen.
I hate most people's grandmas.
Right.
Maybe.
Now, he's got strong loyalty of his fellow partisans.
Yes.
Which we all know, right? But a steady approval rating could also be a problem because he's already in a vulnerable position heading into re-election and is consistently running behind likely opponent Joe Biden. Even if the crisis were merely damaging enough to prevent Trump from boosting his public support, and this is an argument I've made over and over, even if the crisis were merely damaging enough to prevent Trump from boosting his public support by November, that itself might turn out to be the decisive factor in the election. The fact that he is trailing Biden by 3 and everybody says, oh, well, that'll change as everybody rallies around him. They are rallying around him, and he's still trailing Biden.
Okay. Yes. Point made.
Right. Point made several times. It's not the virus, number 4. It's the economy, stupid. The most worrying component of this crisis for Trump and re-election campaign isn't the spread of the virus itself and the casualties, because he doesn't care about that.
Sure.
Instead, it's the larger impact on the economy. While the specific quantitative estimates of current forecasting models should be treated with skepticism in such an unprecedented and fast-moving environment, it seems inevitable that there will be a sudden and catastrophic economic shock that will at least temporarily push the U.S. into recession. Trump and his supporters will argue with justification it would be unfair to blame him for the economic misery, but voters tend to reward presidents for good economic times, punish them for bad times, regardless of the incumbent's actual responsibility. I mean, the Obama economy is what Trump has been running on. So, cry me a river. It wouldn't be surprising if Trump's popularity remained stable or rose a bit over the next few weeks, only to decline later in the year once the larger consequences become more visible to average citizens. He therefore has every reason to wish not only for a shallower economic plunge than most analysts now foresee, but also for a historically rapid national rebound once the worst is over. Now, Dave Hopkins is a political scientist, and I detect with my doom and gloom predictions about what's going to happen when people actually start getting sick and the hospitals are overrun, that the political scientists and everybody else tends to minimize just how bad this is when they say it's not really the virus, it's the overall bigger economic picture.
Well,
when the hospitals look like Italy and the news is broadcasting, this is what it's like lining up in the hallways waiting for your ventilator that isn't going to come to you in time, or that 80-year-olds are taking themselves off voluntarily so that they could save their 50-year-old nephew.
Yes.
Right? When stuff like that happens, it's not the overall bigger economic picture. It's the virus, stupid. And they don't see that. It's amazing when you read these things, but the sense you get from reading this is, okay, bad as the virus is, it's making us stay indoors. It's so way worse than that. They don't get that. It hasn't been internalized. And so they don't analyze it like that. What they analyze is what they know. And they know because there's data forever that they've studied. They're political scientists. They've studied the economic data and its effect on the election. There is no data on the 1918 pandemic and how that affected 2020 voters. So they can't grok it. It just doesn't fit, and it doesn't work its way into it. Right. If they were really scared the way the Senate is scared, they'd be writing this totally differently. And I'm not wishing this on them. But if they lost a family member to the virus, they wouldn't just say it's not the virus, stupid, it's the economy. They just wouldn't.
Yeah, well, that's what it takes to get most people to learn anything.
Yeah, and that's another conversation I was having online.
Oh.
Trump's supporters never changed. And I said, this is different. Well, I hope you're right. And I said, I hope I'm wrong, because the magnitude of what it would take for them to change their mind is such that you would not want to wish this on anybody. And yet, the magnitude of that is what we are looking at here.
Yeah. Well, right. We have our fish tank couple. That
Yeah.
maybe we can just point to that, and people will realize. But if not, the process is going to have to take its time and work itself out. We'll see what happens, I guess.
Right. For example, although Monmouth showed that Biden and Trump are very close, I think Biden was leading by 3 in that poll, if I'm not mistaken. New Monmouth poll finds Biden leading Trump 50-41 in the 300 swing counties decided by fewer than 10 points. Hillary won them by 1 point. Just to put this in perspective.
All right. Well, that's more points. So
Monmouth polling director tells me, I think that's Lee Marengoff. He's very good. Tells me Trump's approval in swing counties remains close to what it was in November 2018, and we know how that turned out.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, we do now.
Stan Greenberg, writing in The Atlantic, Americans' revulsion for Trump is underappreciated. As Democrats fret about their own prospects, many fail to recognize the president's fundamental weakness. But these nuggets of conventional political wisdom obscure something fundamental, something even Democrats have trouble seeing. The U.S. is in revolt against Donald Trump, and the likely Democratic nominee, Biden, already holds a daunting lead over Trump in the battleground states that will decide the 2020 election. I just talked about that. By the way of disclosure, I'm a Democratic pollster. I want Democrats to win, but no matter, I also want candidates and party operatives to base decisions such as where and how to campaign on an accurate view of the political landscape. Even partisans want to be accurate. So, sure, I'm a partisan. I call myself Dem from Connecticut online. I still want to be accurate about what I'm telling you. Just
Right.
because I'm
It's
a partisan
embarrassing
doesn't mean
if
I'm
you're
going to
not.
lie about it. I'm not a Republican.
Yeah. Well, we are working on different models. That's true, and we have a projection problem,
And we have good
will have
Republicans who are, I get along with
difficulty
quite well,
understanding.
and we deal with each other on the Romulan neutral zone of, polling, which is pretty neutral. At the moment, Stan Greenberg writes, Democrats are underestimating their own strength and misperceiving the sources of it. And again, suburban women.
Oh.
They are not going to look at this and say, oh, you want to kill grandma? Great, I'm with you.
Well, mothers-in-law sometimes, but they
No,
also
the guys
have
may go
parents.
for that. The women are not going to go for
Oh,
that.
no? Well,
Guys are stupid.
I guess that's possible. I don't know. I always feel like there's some sort of secret seething that sometimes goes on. In other families, not mine. We're
All
very
right.
happy.
And then finally, Rachel
true.
Bitecofer has updated her after the presidential primary debates prediction.
Yes.
Presumptive nominee now with Joe Biden, and Bernie Sanders is going to do whatever he wants. It's completely irrelevant. With a presumptive nominee, Democrats hold sizable advantages in Electoral College with a baseline of 289 in the negative partisanship model that she's working with. And she's now at Niskanen, and she has a map. And that's 289, assuming that North Carolina and Florida are neutral and could go either way.
Oh, okay. So even if they happen to...
And if you kill off Trump voters in Florida, it's going blue.
All right. So then it would be more than 289.
Yes.
Okay. Well...
So, it's...
I'm not saying
don't
it should
worry about
happen.
how
I'm
Trump gets a
just
mild bump
saying-
in his ratings
Okay.
over the next week or two. It's a month from now. And, of course, in November, that matters the most. So that's the message.
Okay.
And, some pretty smart people are looking at this and explaining why that is.
All right. Yeah. Well, I think the easiest takeaway is, yes, although you might want to smack your forehead and
Don't touch your
scream
face.
about. Right. Well, first of all, yeah, don't do that.
Even the emoji. Don't touch your face
Right.
emoji.
Okay. Yeah, they should have something like that, an emoji with its hands away from its face.
They didn't have the shrug.
Yeah, we could use that, and that's not me shrugging and in disinterest. That's me not touching my face. You can tell everybody that. But yeah, people are amazed. How could it be going up when something so terrible is happening and he's doing such a poor job of it? And it's a good point to point out that disasters like this, typically, historically, you see rallying to the president to try and help the country recover. And the fact that this bump is a matter of points when it, for instance, after things like 9/11, could put your president in the 70 to 90 approval range, makes you wonder, all right, well, why aren't people getting that? The fact that this entire shutdown of the economy results in the smallest blip, that's as high as it's going. So, it's only going to
So
plummet
let's
from there.
talk a little bit about the Democratic presidential primary politics.
Oh, all right.
Okay?
Sure.
So you watch Trump and his news conference, and you want to put your head through the TV because it's so infuriating.
They're very thin now.
But there's an antidote to that. Every day about 11 or 11:30, Andrew Cuomo comes on and speaks to the nation for about 45 minutes, which is covered live by the cable networks instead of Trump.
Okay, good.
Which drives Trump's crazy, and that's why he keeps showing up, because he wants to out-Cuomo Cuomo and can't. Yesterday, Governor Cuomo responded to Republicans by saying, my mother is not expendable, and your mother is not expendable.
Yes, though yours is.
And you can even go on Chris Cuomo's show, and the two can bicker about it, which is one of the greatest things on Twitter if you want to follow that. The point is that Cuomo briefly considered running back in the day. Remember when things were normal?
Yes, well, that's what Cuomo's do.
And what did we all say? Don't.
Right.
Did you like him?
No.
You, personally?
I don't think so.
Why?
I don't know. He wasn't my governor. I didn't really care about him. When he shows up in the news for me, it's because people are complaining about his having done something unprogressive in New York.
Right. That's my point exactly.
Okay.
So he might have made a deal with some conservative Republicans masquerading as Democrats in the state legislature in order to get stuff done.
That's the sort of
He
thing.
might have been too nice to Chris Christie. He might have made a deal to somehow hide slush funds associated with the Port Authority in New York and New Jersey, with the two governors run together. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you might have thought, okay, I don't like this guy.
Yes, that's
And yet,
okay. That's
in a
true.
crisis,
Yes.
his ratings have and will skyrocket because he's showing leadership.
Yes, and doing it in contrast to one of the worst leaders ever, so that
And
helps.
also showing empathy in contrast to one of the worst leaders ever.
So thank you, Donald Trump.
Does that mean that I want Andrew Cuomo for president? We could do worse.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to the people actually running.
Okay, because that's
All right.
reality.
Why is Joe Biden popular?
I don't.
Why are people voting for Joe Biden? Because he represents stability, normalcy, empathy, all the things that Cuomo represents. And that, I've told you this from the beginning. You may not like his policies or think that he exaggerates, which he does, and, he flubs things because he stutters, but also he flubs things even if he didn't stutter. And he did some things because he's got a career that's long enough so that back in the day, stuff that he did then is not acceptable. Now, all of that's true. Plus, he's, 109 years old, and a newer generation wants their chance at power. All of that's true.
Yes.
But he's a decent guy. I said that from the beginning. People underestimate Joe Biden's strength because they like him. He's a decent guy. And now, when we're talking about killing grandma, it matters.
Guess so.
It matters with Cuomo. It matters with Biden. That's why the Democratic primary is over. I'm sorry you didn't have a chance to vote yet. You may never get a chance if we don't get these things fixed.
Right.
But that's why Biden won. And it was just so obvious after South Carolina and said, fine, we've had enough of this. And the Democratic voters, not the DNC, not the insiders, not the elite, the voters, unless you think black women voting in South Carolina are the elite, the voters said, you know what? We've decided. And in the Democratic primary, at least, probably in the national election too, you can't win if you cannot convince black voters to vote for you.
True.
And Bernie couldn't, and Biden could, and we talked about why. It doesn't mean that they love Joe, but they know Joe, and they feel like he'll be beholden to them, and it's the best, worst choice that you could make. So they will. They're very pragmatic. And everybody else took a cue from that and said, you know what? Given what's going on here, it's time for us to be pragmatic too. And so why is Andrew Cuomo popular? Because we need him to be. That's a very pragmatic choice that people have made.
Yes.
I like what he's saying. I forgive him everything else for now.
Maybe.
Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Later, I'll yell at you for it. Doesn't mean I love you.
You don't
But
have to forgive him.
if you were running against Donald Trump right now, you'd probably be leading by 50 points.
Very likely so. And maybe that could be true of anybody, but that's not what we have.
Okay, and then I want to end today's segment with just a quick story and this happened in New Haven. There was a guy in rehab, outpatient rehab, who tested positive for coronavirus, was placed in quarantine at Yale, and fled. Remember the old Ebola stories about people having Ebola and didn't want to stay in the hospital, so ran away? Well, that's what he did.
He fled.
Yeah, he fled. He fled with his virus. He took his virus with him.
How bad? How irresponsible? What was
Did he go out because he was in detox, or he was worried that he would be detoxing on his own? I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that homeless, which he was, and detox rehab folks are especially vulnerable population right now.
Yes.
And there are very few provisions and very few discussions about them that's going on. The shelters, of course, the prisons. I mean, the most vulnerable of us are the most vulnerable populations that we shouldn't forget about. So in the moment or two I had before the 10 o'clock hour, I just thought I'd remind ourselves to not forget them.
Yes, that will require some special treatment and a different approach, and not everybody is cut out for or in a situation where listening to medical authorities is a realistic option.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's my show for today, Wednesday, and I'll be back tomorrow. We'll do it again. I don't have a pundit roundup tomorrow, but I do on Friday. And there's a lot happening, and it's a quickly moving story. But that's basically the summary of what's going on.
Okay. Well, we'll have to. All right. Yeah, we can deal with it. I didn't realize Rand Paul was homeless, but I feel sorry for him now.
I don't.
Okay. Well, good.
I think right now, next to Trump, he's probably the biggest jerk on the planet.
Yeah, maybe. Except for possibly the kids who are videotaping themselves licking things in stores.
Yeah, but you know what? Rand Paul is a professional. Those guys are amateurs.
Okay.
And, I just, his neighbor went up in my eyes in terms of estimation. That's all I can say.
Right. That's my T-shirt. Rand Paul's neighbor did nothing wrong.
Exactly right. Take care and stay healthy and recover from your recent surgery. Yes. And I will talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Very good. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to tomorrow then.
Good.
We'll get our next
I hope tomorrow comes. It's one of those days.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Greg. And we all have to deal. This is also part of the new reality is generally speaking, it's always been the case for both of us, but the rest of the world is catching up to the reality of distractions in the background during their conference calls or what have you. There's been a great collection circulating, or building, I guess, now in circulation of various such incidents, some of which are more believable as being actual, honest-to-God accidents, others coming under suspicion as having been staged, but they are nonetheless quite entertaining. One such collection I saw yesterday began with, I guess, collection of people on their conference calls for work with their video on and having their family members, significant others, what have you, wander into the frame inadvertently, often without pants, for instance, in the case of some of the men in the lives of women conducting their workplace business online. So that one was pretty interesting. That also led to one of the better ones so far. Best in class, as I've seen so far, is the Zoom-based office conference going on with, I don't know, I'd say about somewhere between 8 and 12 participants, reminding us of some of the important protocols for these days of distance learning, distance working, including even though the ability to participate in such conferences by phone, smartphones with video and everything, or laptop, makes you mobile, and that's helpful, so you can work from wherever you are. Do remember not to take, say, the video phone with you into the bathroom if you take a quick bathroom break, because that was so far the best one I've seen. 10, 12 colleagues on talking and somebody gabbing away, doing their presentation for the group, blissfully unaware of exactly what everybody else is seeing, And then one of the members of the group listening decides to take a quick bathroom break and puts the phone down, and only in the middle of the process, we'll say, of taking care of business, realizes, oh my God, there's video going on here, and fumbles to turn the video off or turn the phone over, and then everybody finally cracks up laughing. But they did an admirable job of keeping their composure while it was happening, and their colleague was speaking, and it was only when it finally resulted in a mad dash to flip the phone over that everybody broke up laughing, and the person who was talking was like, what happened? What? I didn't even see what went on. And then they all disclaimed having seen what went on, but we all saw. So now the rest of the world catching up to the noise in the background of podcasts, or the toddlers bursting into the room while you're broadcasting from South Korea, or what have you. And as the commentators who compiled the collection commented, we may be moving into a golden age of that sort of mishap, and we'll all be able to entertain ourselves endlessly with the results. Okay, next break coming up here, but we'll see. Give us a chance to organize for the flip side here in our second hour. One quick story I'll drop on your lap that made it through the KITM hashtag this morning. News from the Miami Herald. Where else? Neither hurricanes nor 9/11, we are told by the headline, caused as big a surge in gun sales as coronavirus, which shouldn't surprise you terribly. I mean, these are the sorts of things that spark that sort of gun buying craze, and I guess everybody is under the impression that their stockpiles might become vulnerable to looters or what have you. But I assume that there's some data involved in that. I don't know whether it's necessary for us to dig through and find out exactly what the data says. But to no one's surprise, in Florida, where they are taking some measures on the private side, limiting the number of customers who can be in the gun shop at any one time to 5, and enforcing some sort of social distancing among the people online, though it doesn't look like they're doing a great job with 6 feet. They're doing about 4. But there you have it. News from Florida. Everybody wants more guns. More gun stories, by the way, happening around the country. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I decided to do things backwards on that one. It wasn't really so much of a decision as a happening, but I'm getting more and more reports of just sort of random gun encounters. They're always happening, and people are always pulling guns on one another for no particular reason. But now we have more coronavirus-related stories about things like that. I did see one yesterday. Reminded now by a second one coming from our gun fail friend SFDB on Twitter. Yesterday's news, as I recall off the top of my head, was, I don't know where it was from, but a guy waiting online for services at the post office. And let's see, somebody, is this it? Maybe this is it. I'll have to open it up and see if this is the same story. Yeah, this is the one. So it was in Georgia, now being reported by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, in Alpharetta, Georgia, or at least the man himself is from Alpharetta. And boy, what a gun mustache he's got on him. He's got one of those giant, not exactly handlebar mustaches, but that's the style that seemed to extend all the way out to his ears. Gray-haired older gentleman. Alpharetta man pointed gun at 2 women wearing masks. Feared catching coronavirus. And I guess that's now something that stupid people think you can do. While authorities and officials are heavily advising social distancing during the coronavirus pandemic, an Alpharetta man is accused of taking it way too far. Trying to put, I guess, something of a humorous spin on this. It really doesn't deserve it. He faces charges after his overreaction to 2 women wearing masks at a post office, police said. And here, as we're being advised now that the thinking on wearing masks has changed, public understanding of that has been lagging. And in general, I think the vast majority of the public seeing someone wear a mask, I would say maybe outside of New York, and possibly some of our other more sophisticated metropolitan locations where people are somewhat more used to seeing this and other esoteric behavior in the outdoor spaces. The vast majority of our population probably still guesses that people who are wearing masks are sick and are known to be carrying the virus. Because at first we were getting that ultimately erroneous information. It was being distributed, of course, in the hopes that people wouldn't be hoarding masks and taking them away from medical workers. But okay, I think we've been over that a couple of times. But maybe we should keep digging up the writing on it and putting it in the roundup just to make sure everybody's got the new news. So anyway, okay. So for people who are who've been trained improperly to believe that anybody wearing a mask has got the virus, I guess you can come to understand, sort of, not forgive, but understand what 75-year-old, this is some kind of name too, Harvey Joel Taratoot. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce that, but it's Taratoot. Well, he overreacted, right? He saw two women wearing masks who may or may not have been ill, but perhaps more likely were just worried about being either asymptomatic spreaders somehow, or thought, well, this will help me increase the odds that I don't catch it from anyone else. So they are out there minding their own business, trying to keep other people healthy, trying to keep themselves healthy, and 75-year-old Harvey Joel Taratoot instead points a gun at them. This is a woman and her adult granddaughter, as it turns out, at the post office. Which one? Are you in Alpharetta, Georgia? You want to go check it out? Webbridge Road. The post office on Webbridge Road on Sunday, according to the Alpharetta Department of Public Safety's Facebook post. When officers arrived at the scene, Taratoot had left. He had fled the scene, just like the guy who fled his healthcare situation at Yale. The women told police they were both wearing medical masks and gloves when they entered the post office before they were confronted by the gun-wielding man. And remember, they're wearing masks and gloves probably because they want to keep themselves safe. And then what happened? They were, in fact, endangered. This does not mean don't wear masks. It means don't point guns at people. So he pointed the gun at them and yelled at them to get back, the women told police. The suspect then left the building and drove away. One of the victims was able to get his license plate number, allowing officers to visit the man's house. Taratoot, who still possessed a holstered handgun, police said, was confronted and taken into custody on charge of pointing a pistol at another. If you could be charged with that, well, that sounds like it'll stick. The Post did not go into further detail about what the suspect told them, but police did say he admitted to pointing the gun at the victims because he was afraid of catching the coronavirus. Folks, this is a quote now, not me using the word folks, but folks, this was such an overreaction on the part of the suspect, the Post said. Please do not allow fear to overcome your logic while we're going through this. This could have certainly ended with tragic results for everyone involved. Now, of course, we should probably point out there are many in the audience in particular who think, well, it's too late to not allow fear to overcome your logic. If you are going to the post office with a holstered handgun, you've already done that. Of course, gun rights enthusiasts would say the very opposite. It is, in fact, more logical and will relax your fears of assaults or somehow being inadvertently approached in some manner that might increase your danger if you are wearing a holstered handgun. And so it is, in fact, logical to deal with your fears by arming yourself. But, well, that's just one of the ongoing debates that we have in this country, and both sides, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, you know what? Here, something I wasn't necessarily intending to include in the broadcast, but as I see in my email some reminders of some work I'm doing on that subject, I will remind everybody, if you are at home and doing more online shopping than usual, if you are an Amazon shopper, and I guess, by the way, there's probably a lot of varying opinions about the wisdom and fairness and social responsibility of using Amazon to do that shopping, I guess that's always a debate we're going to have. And we worry quite a bit about the conditions in which the people packing your packages when you order from Amazon are working in. But if you are ordering from Amazon, I would suggest perhaps that you look into something like this. There's the does everybody know about it already? I'm sure it's not. They haven't been hiding it. They just haven't been hyping it a whole lot. Amazon Smile program. If you sign up for an account at Amazon, or if you go to smile.amazon.com, I think is the way they have designated it. But if you look up Amazon Smile, it's just one of those little programs that you sign up with, and I don't know what goes into determining which purchases are eligible for this, but they do put it this way. Eligible purchases. Amazon donates a small percentage, and it is a small percentage, 0.5%, 0.5%, but of the purchase price, you can choose a charity or a nonprofit organization, however you want to phrase it, from among their list, and designate them as the beneficiary of that 0.5% of the purchase price donation. So it's a good way to raise money for charities in this. If you're going to be purchasing from Amazon, you might as well have some donation made to charity along the way. So pick your favorite from among the list, and you should check and see. I mean, as it turns out, there are lots of charities that are registered. Large ones, small local ones, a lot of communities of faith are included in all that. So if you happen to be a member or congregant at a local house of worship that is registered, you could consider signing up. You could encourage your place to sign up if it's not, or make it Doctors Without Borders, or make it Fish Tank Chuggers Anonymous if you want to help them, I guess. Or maybe you want to start that program so you can get in there and help out. But if you're going to be doing that and ordering from Amazon, it's a good way to perhaps throw a couple bucks to some people who might need it. A better way, of course, would be just giving those dollars directly to them. But this seems like a pretty harmless way of forcing the issue and reminding yourself about the importance of charitable giving so you can deal with the situation as you see fit. Okay, so that was a nice little diversion. Let's see if I can't keep the lines of communication open here via Twitter and see if I'm missing out on anything. All right, here's what's in Pocket. We got to review the events of the day. What else have we got here? Here's an interesting side note, just to give ourselves some distance from the coronavirus topic for a little while, although it was sent to me in a connected fashion. I didn't catch who was tweeting it, but it came along with the comment of, why don't I trust the Trump administration to handle, say, oversight of this slush fund that's being discussed as part of the coronavirus response bills? Well, one reason is an example like this, and I would have to agree. It's ProPublica's reporting on, well, let's just get to the headline here. Walmart was almost charged criminally over opioids. Did you know this? But the Trump appointees at the Department of Justice killed the indictment. Womp womp on that one. Oh, we actually have that sound effect somewhere, right? Okay. Yes. More womps in it than I thought. But Walmart almost charged criminally over opioids. Even as the company pharmacists protested, this is the setup here from the subheader, even as the company's pharmacists protested, Walmart kept filling suspicious prescriptions. That is a tongue twister, but it's there. This stoking, of course, the country's opioid epidemic. A Republican U.S. attorney in Texas, got that? Thought the evidence was damning, but Trump's political appointees, not so much. Jesse Eisinger and James Bandler are the reporters on the byline for this one, once again from ProPublica. This is one of those opening paragraphs that hints to you that this is going to be a long story. Instead of getting right to the point, we start with narrative. On a Tuesday just before Halloween in 2018. Oh boy, long read coming. It's true. A group of federal prosecutors and agents from Texas arrived in Washington. For almost 2 years, they'd been investigating the opioid dispensing practices of Walmart, the largest company in the world. They had amassed what they viewed as highly damning evidence, only to face a major obstacle: top Trump appointees at the Department of Justice. The prosecution team had come to Washington to try to save its case. Joe Brown, real name apparently, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Texas, led the group, which included Heather Rattan, might be how she pronounces it, R-A-T-T-A-N, right? An over 20-year veteran of the office who had spent much of her career prosecuting members of drug cartels. Yowza. They first went to the DEA headquarters to meet the acting administrator. That's right, the acting administrator, Uttam Dillon. Okay, there, Rattan laid out the evidence. Rattan, maybe? I don't know. Opioids dispensed by Walmart pharmacies in Texas had killed customers who had overdosed. Right? That's the big problem. Like the fish tanks. The pharmacists who dispensed these opioids had told the company they didn't want to fill the prescriptions because they were coming from doctors who were running pill mills. They're able to tell by some miracle. But so let's not do this one because. Let's intervene here. They pleaded for help and guidance from Walmart's corporate office. What did Walmart's corporate office want to do? Fill their prescriptions because of money, especially from pill mills, right? They'll just go somewhere else and give all that money to some other pharmacy that'll agree to do it, I'm sure was the argument. Investigators had obtained records of similar cries for help from Walmart pharmacies all over the country, from Maine, North Carolina, Kansas, and Washington, and other states. That'd be all over the country. They reported hundreds of thousands of suspicious or inappropriate opioid prescriptions. One Walmart employee warned about a Florida doctor who had a, quote, list of patients from Kentucky that have been visiting pharmacies in all of central Wisconsin recently. That doctor had sent patients to Walmarts in more than 30 other states. That is pretty interesting and alarming. And I also, by the way, here's, I don't know, my personal reaction to this just briefly. It takes me 20 minutes to get Claritin now because I have to fill out forms and I got to write down my driver's license number and make a copy of my, all these things. And I got to write in a log once a month because I go and get a box of Claritin because we're supposed to be controlling these things. And these guys, I'm making this record presumably so that pharmacists can object and say, this person buying Claritin once a month is doing things normally. This person buying piles of opioids from the same doctor, or these 10 people buying piles of opioids from the same doctor from out of state, and they're from out of state, they're supposed to be red flagging also. I have to go through all this garbage so that this record can be made. And what are they even doing with the record? They're just, who cares? Forget it. The record obviously indicates there's an opioid problem here, and we're still going to do nothing. Well, let me get my Claritin faster, please. If you're not going to bother with the people who are filling out-of-state prescriptions in bulk from pill mills, make my experience faster, at least. In response to these alarms, Walmart compliance officials did not take corporate-wide action to halt the flow of opioids. Instead, they repeatedly admonished pharmacists that they could not cut off any doctor entirely. They could only evaluate each prescription on an individual basis. And they went further. An opioid compliance manager told an executive in an email gathered during the inquiry and viewed by ProPublica that Walmart's focus should be on, quote, driving sales. I mean, evaluating prescriptions on an individual basis isn't a terrible thing to do, but it's, I don't know. All I can tell you is, again, I go through all the trouble and then there's no help in fighting the opioid crisis that comes from going through this trouble. I'm happy to make that sacrifice if I think it means that people who are obviously suspicious will have a little more difficulty or maybe even be prevented from getting their hands on these opioids, but apparently not. So that's kind of interesting. Also interesting here, as I was reading this out, thinking about the number of every time usually when we're reading, I'll put it this way, usually when we're reading about pharmacists lodging some kind of a protest, it's them saying, well, I won't give birth control to people, or I won't give out the Plan B contraceptive pill, or whatever, making some sort of taking some sort of moral stance against contraception or other reproductive health products that women want because they don't believe in either birth control or abortion. And the state now these days stepping in to say that's okay. And here, though, is the state saying pharmacists ought to be stepping in and doing something about this opioid crisis, and they are stepping in. And instead, we now have the corporate layer of our society stepping in and saying, how dare you exercise individual judgment, you pharmacist, and tell customers that they can't have the product they want because you believe yada, yada, yada. And that's an amazing reversal of fortune in that respect, don't you think? All right. After they finished their presentation, the U.S. attorneys from Texas, Dillon sat back in his chair and exclaimed, "Jesus Christ," which is, what a lot of people say, although, I don't know, I guess that's just a colloquialism, but that's the one he chose. Okay, well, this according to 5 people familiar with the investigation and presumably familiar in some respect with Jesus Christ, so they remembered that quite clearly. Why aren't we talking about this as a criminal case, says Dillon. That's precisely what had occurred 7 months earlier. Rattan had informed Walmart that she was preparing to indict the corporation, she told him, for violating the Controlled Substances Act. Indictments of Fortune 500 companies, though, are unheard of, let alone of one with $500 billion in annual revenue and over 2 million employees. But Rattan, who's with support of her boss, Brown, believed the evidence justified such an unprecedented step. Sure, why not? Go for it, right? Before the Texas prosecutors could file their case, however, Walmart escalated concerns to high-ranking officials at the DOJ, who then intervened. Brown was ordered to stand down. On August 31st, 2018, Trump officials officially informed Walmart that the DOJ would decline to prosecute the company, according to a letter from Walmart's lawyer that lays out the chronology of the case. But the Texas prosecutors hadn't given up. Now, 2 months later, they still thought they had a chance to bring the then Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, heard of him, and other top officials around. After the first presentation at the DEA offices that day, the Texas group, now accompanied by the DEA's Dillon, caravanned over to the DOJ. They filed into a big, bright conference room where they were received by Rosenstein and a collection of political appointees and career staff. Rattan and her team were given a half hour to make their presentation. She explained that dispensing opioids without a legitimate medical purpose is legally akin to dealing heroin. Criminal law says if a person or entity is willfully blind or deliberately ignorant, they are as liable as if they had acted intentionally. Once Walmart's headquarters knew its pharmacists were raising alarms about suspicious prescriptions, but the compliance department continued to allow and even push them to fill them, well, that made the company guilty, the Texas prosecutors contended. This was not a question of a few rogue employees, Rattan explained. Walmart had a national problem. Worse, the prosecutors contended the company was a repeat offender. Walmart had agreed to a settlement with the DEA 7 years earlier in which it had promised to improve its controls over the abuse of opioid prescriptions. Still, the problems persisted. Nevertheless, they persisted, right? That's why the prosecutors believed they needed to pursue the extraordinary path of a criminal prosecution. As they concluded, Brown was emphatic, telling Rosenstein, we have to act. And I, laid out this way, I don't see how you come to any other conclusion. We've been through this with them before, and they promised to stop, and they're not doing it. What should we do? I don't know. How about nothing? A fine would not be a sufficient deterrent, the DEA's Dillon added, since Walmart has more money than it knows what to do with. Not that there's anything wrong with that, Rosenstein responded. Okay. According to 5 people familiar with the investigation, we're all capitalists here. Rosenstein's quip brought the prosecutorial team up short. They weren't pursuing Walmart because it was profitable, but because, in their view, the company had put its customers at deadly risk. Not long after, Rosenstein's assistant entered the room to say he had a call, so he left. The prosecutors' push to persuade Rosenstein to revive the criminal case had failed. Still, there were multiple avenues left to pursue. After the meeting, the Texas prosecutors focused on bringing criminal charges against individual employees, as Rosenstein and other Trump DOJ officials directed them to do. But later, when the prosecutors sought to indict a mid-level Walmart manager, the Trump officials blocked that too. That left potential civil claims. After the meeting with Rosenstein, Brian Benkowski, we'll hope that's the pronunciation, the head of the criminal division, had told Brown, "You have a whopper of a civil case," according to 4 people familiar with the investigation. While that may be true, again, just reminder of who he is, what it means for the head of the criminal division to say, well, you got a great civil case, take it away from me. Right? I'm not going to help you. But the civil case, too, was stymied by Trump appointees in the DOJ who continued to side with Walmart. In its dealings with the DOJ, Walmart pursued a classic strategy. It relied on Jones Day, an influential law firm that has salted officials throughout the Trump administration. Walmart conceded mistakes and opened the door for a civil settlement, but the company consistently denied that any of its employees committed crimes. In the view of many prosecutors and agents, Walmart never fully cooperated. From the beginning of the investigation, Walmart said it was cooperating and taking action to fix its opioid dispensing practices. Still, the company acknowledged that it halted its cooperation in mid-2018 after it became convinced prosecutors were not acting in good faith. How about that? So they had a deal, and the only thing that mattered at DOJ was that Walmart said prosecutors weren't acting in good faith. And Walmart and Jones Day added a Trumpian tactic. At a moment when the president had established a habit of attacking the investigators in his own government, the company followed a similarly aggressive approach. Walmart lawyers complained to Washington about Texas prosecutors, accusing them of seeking to embarrass the company while using the threat of criminal charges to extort a larger civil fine. Criminal and civil investigations can run in parallel, but it's an ethical violation for prosecutors to use the threat of criminal penalties to generate a higher civil settlement. In a statement to ProPublica, Walmart spokesman Randy Hargrove reiterated the company's complaints. The United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Texas engaged in misconduct multiple times as it investigated Walmart, including threatening to bring meritless criminal charges against Walmart in order to extort an unjustified civil settlement from the company. This behavior was clearly improper, violated the Department of Justice's own internal policies and rules of legal ethics, and was entirely inconsistent with the department's long-standing policies. So what's the threat here? They absolutely, positively, apparently anyway, meant to see the DOJ charge Walmart criminally. Seeing that the DOJ was unwilling to charge them criminally and hearing from them, you've got a hell of a civil case, they moved to make a civil case against them. And Walmart said, well, what happened to the criminal case? You were only bringing that up to try to threaten us into settling a civil case. This is a violation of DOJ policies. They were directed by the DOJ top brass to pursue them civilly. But they just put a different spin on it and say it's misconduct. Interesting. Hargrove added that having failed to bring baseless criminal charges against the company, it appears that one or more individuals familiar with the Eastern District of Texas's investigation have violated Department of Justice rules in an attempt to achieve through leaks what could not be accomplished in a court of law. In response to the Walmart statement, the U.S. Attorney Brown offered his own to ProPublica. Let's see what we can get in about that one. Drug Enforcement Agency investigations of multiple opioid overdose deaths in the Eastern District of Texas resulted in our office opening parallel civil and criminal investigations of Walmart's pharmacy practices. These investigations have been handled appropriately and according to Department of Justice policy. These investigations, which we would typically not confirm or deny, but do so now because of Walmart's statement, continue. Accordingly, it would be inappropriate to comment further on the specific facts of the case. How do you like that? So that sets up pretty interestingly. There's an awful lot left of this article, long enough that I can tell you we probably won't get all the way through it and still hit some of the other interesting stories of the day. But I thought you might want a slight break from coronavirus. We may return to it yet. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Still lots to discover in this Walmart case, but I think the point is made, and I will allow everyone else a chance to read through the article for themselves, although I bet I will read it off the air at some point and say, "Oh, I wish I had said that on the air," and maybe we'll return to it, but it's awfully long, and so many other things that I want to read to you partially. And suggesting you've got lots of time on your hands now, perhaps working at home or perhaps not working, the more unfortunate of the two possibilities. And maybe you want to fill it with some interesting reading. I hinted the other day that David Farenthold was tugging at another thread, and I'd like to bring that one into the loop. I have his tweet from Monday, I think, yes, the 23rd, talking about his new investigation here. What happened before Donald Trump called for reevaluating lockdowns? Pardon me. That's, I guess, that was the natural question when he started hinting that he was going to reopen the economy for Easter because it would be so beautiful, not because there was any science or medical advice that said that would be an okay time, but because it would be beautiful and we would have packed churches on Sunday, which is exactly the opposite of what we really want to have for public health, but whatever. So, what was Farenthold was wondering, and I bet he had a pretty good idea in mind before. I think he had a thesis in mind before he began, and he was testing it. Is there data to back up the assumption that Farenthold and likely you and I are making about what might be driving his sudden interest in reopening the economy, even if it's not going to work, or is going to do the opposite of what we need done here? So, what happened before Trump started calling for reevaluating lockdowns? Well, the answer is his company had to close 6 of its top 7 revenue-generating clubs and hotels. And by the way, note to self, I still have to find that L.A. story for you. That's somewhere in my Twitter feed. I'll have to dig that one up. But he includes a link, of course, to his article about it, which I'll open up, and let me read the rest of his Twitter thread to see where he's going with this here. I didn't realize until today, that was Monday, how corona closures have hit Donald Trump's biggest revenue generators. 6 out of the top 7, and the one that's open is doing pretty bad, too. One odd thing about Trump's hotel and golf empire is that he's unusually dependent on a handful of properties. Doral alone produces $75 million a year, more than his D.C., Chicago, Vancouver, Waikiki, Aberdeen, and Vegas hotels combined. The county has now shut down Doral down in Florida, so that'd be a big hit to him. Let's take a look at the fuller story here. Before Trump called for reevaluating lockdowns, they shuttered 6 of his top-earning clubs and resorts. David Farenthold joined by Joshua Partlow and Jonathan O'Connell in this March 23rd piece in the Washington Post. President Trump's private business has shut down 6 of its top 7 revenue-producing clubs and hotels because of restrictions meant to slow the spread of the novel coronavirus, potentially depriving Trump's company of millions of dollars in revenue. And by the way, yes, you're probably screaming at your radio now. This is in one of the most compact nutshells you could possibly come up with. This is the emoluments problem in a nutshell. The President of the United States is supposed to be making decisions for the good of the people of the United States and in our national security interest, instead distracted by and perhaps guided in his decision-making by his personal business interests. There was really nothing that you could have come up with that would have convinced any of us that he was sufficiently distanced from the Trump organization not to be making his decisions this way, no matter who he left in charge. But he's been so obvious about it, you just got to bring up this is an impeachable emoluments conflict of interest all by itself. We're really, there's people out there on television today on behalf of the administration or hinting that they have connection to the administration, saying, we ought to reopen the economy because the price is worth it, kill grandma, etc. But what's really happening here, we keep saying, well, killing grandma for the stock market. Maybe it's not even for the stock market. I mean, like we said, Trump may not really have significant holdings in the stock market. We're killing grandma for the Trump organization's bottom line here. It's exactly what the emoluments clauses, both domestic and foreign, were supposed to avoid because it's an obvious and huge problem. It was actually one of the few things happening in the modern era that we can say, oh yeah, the founding fathers absolutely did anticipate this, and we still aren't doing anything about it. So, where were we? Right. So he's potentially depriving his own companies of millions of dollars in revenue if he actually goes through with keeping the closures in place. These closures come as Trump is considering easing restrictions on movement sooner than federal public health officials, experts recommend, in the name of reducing the virus's economic damage. To him, I would add. In a tweet late Sunday, Trump said the measures could be lifted as soon as March 30th, and here he goes to all caps, because it's affecting his bottom line. We cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself, he wrote on Twitter. In his unprecedented dual role as president and owner of a sprawling business, which is a euphemistic way of saying in his unprecedented violation of the emoluments clause, Trump is facing dual crises caused by the coronavirus. As he is trying to manage the pandemic from the White House, limiting its casualties as well as the economic fallout, his company is also navigating a major threat to the hospitality industry. That threatens to pull Trump in opposite directions, because the strategies that many scientists believe will help lessen the public emergency, like strict, long-lasting restrictions on movement, could deepen the short-term problems of Trump's private business by keeping doors shut and customers away. The White House and the Trump Organization did not respond to questions Monday. The company, which Trump says is run day-to-day by his sons Eric and Don Jr., who nonetheless won't keep their fingers out of the political pie, has not said whether it would apply for a bailout of the hotel industry if Congress created one. Trump has not either. On Sunday, he was asked if his business would abstain from any federal bailout. He did not give a clear answer. He did worse than that, by the way. But he did not give a clear answer, and then they quote him as saying, "Everything's changing, just so you understand. It's all changing," he said, "but I have no idea." In addition, I think they left this part out. As I understand it, he also said it was one of those nasty questions that was a setup, a gotcha, and that the person asking it was also a lousy reporter. But maybe I have that wrong. By the way, in what's happening today, I mean, again, this is a Monday piece, but I'll just remind you, just since you're thinking about it, I grabbed these tweets from Manu Raju earlier today. Again, he's the congressional correspondent for CNN, saying that Schumer's office has said that he's secured a provision in the agreement for the coronavirus response, the Phase 3 bill in the Senate, that will prohibit businesses controlled by the president, vice president, members of Congress, and heads of executive departments from receiving loans or investments from the Treasury programs. So that seems like a good thing, at least on its face. Of course, Trump will say, well, it isn't the president or vice president or members of Congress or executive departments who controls this business. It's my sons, and they have nothing to do with it. Ha ha. Well, as it turns out, Manu says, the children, spouses, and in-laws of the aforementioned principals are also included in this prohibition. Well, so he'll disown them and then run it anyway. I don't know. I'm not certain exactly how he'll respond to this, but it's a necessary provision. Whether it's enforced or not is an entirely different question, and you would be right in doubting that it would be. But at least it's there. All you can do is write it in there and then say, well, he either violates the law or he doesn't, and we either prosecute him for violating the law or we don't, and the answer is we won't. But okay. I mean, that's kind of what you can do. Otherwise, I mean, other than that, there are other remedies, but most of them are illegal or contrary to Department of Justice policy. Take your pick. All right. Trump, so he yelled at the reporters who asked him about this, although that's not reflected in this report. Trump's business includes some commercial office buildings as well, of course, which have long-term leases and should not be hurt as immediately by the virus. But he is also heavily invested in the hotel business with 11 hotels around the world. That business needs new people walking in the door every day to eat and stay. And by keeping people away, the coronavirus has brought that industry its worst downturn in recent history. The data is bad, and we haven't seen the worst of it yet, said Jan Freitag, a senior vice president with the firm STR. And I don't know whether that's Jan or Jan, but maybe we'll find out. Yeah, it says he, so maybe it's Jan. Jan Freitag, a senior vice president with the firm STR, which analyzes hotel industry data. He noted that the damage to the industry is being caused by the lockdowns and the fear of the virus. What we're seeing here is a rapid descent that's going to last. So it's going to be a little bit of worst case combination of post 9/11 and the financial crisis of 2009. So far, the Trump Organization has closed hotels in Las Vegas, Doral, Florida, Ireland, and Turnberry, Scotland, which is where I recommend that Prince Charles go to convalesce. I'm sure they could open it up for him. As well as the Mar-a-Lago Club in Florida and a golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. You know that one, where he spends his summers. Many of the clubs closed because they had to, under local orders. Others closed on their own, following strong guidance or recommendation from local officials. Those are 6 of Trump's top 7 revenue-producing clubs and hotels, bringing in about $174 million total per year, according to Trump's most recent financial disclosures. We don't know what his taxes say about it, because we still haven't seen them. That works out to $478,000 per day, revenue that is likely to be sharply reduced with the clubs shuttered. The disclosures provide self-reported revenue figures, but not profits. Again, that might be reflected in taxes, and despite the fact that the law very clearly says we are to have access to those for members of Congress, duly authorized members of Congress, they still haven't been turned over. So what hope is there, let's say, of being able to enforce provisions in the coronavirus bailout bill that say this money can't go to the president or his family members? What if it just does? But it can't. But what if it does? I don't know. Nothing, I guess. Another of Trump's golf clubs in Aberdeen, Scotland, appeared likely to shut down soon after an order from British Prime Minister Boris Johnson that non-essential shops should close and that people should leave home only to buy food, medicine, or to exercise alone. Even the Trump properties that remain open have been sharply affected. In Chicago, New York, and Washington, the restaurants have closed, cutting off a key source of revenue. On Monday, the managing director of the Trump Hotel in Washington, Michael, maybe, or Mikhail. How do you, it's spelled Mickael. Mikhail Damlencourt, maybe? Well, that's my best stab at it. Anyway, he sought to find humor in the situation. Let's see how he does. Posting a photo on Twitter that showed him and the chef of the hotel's restaurant, BLT Prime. They were standing 6 feet apart at the door of the empty steakhouse, working safely on the hotel's next chapter, he wrote. Okay, well, not very good humor-wise, but it's not offensive. There is also a BLT Prime in Trump's Doral Resort, where restaurants closed last week to comply with the lockdown orders. The steakhouse told the state of Florida in a public filing that its entire 98-person workforce, 6 bartenders, 16 bussers, 24 captains, 8 hosts, 6 managers, 8 runners, 4 chefs, 5 dishwashers, 18 line cooks, and 3 pastry chefs, beautiful chocolate cake, have all been laid off. These layoffs are anticipated to be temporary, BLT Prime told the state. However, unfortunately, at this time, we cannot predict when the restaurants will reopen. In addition, 160 people have been laid off at Trump's D.C. hotel, at least 51 laid off at Trump's New York hotel, and an unknown number laid off at Trump's Las Vegas hotel, according to people familiar with those properties. 3 of Trump's hotels in Doral, Chicago, and Washington have outstanding loans from Deutsche Bank that originally totaled more than $300 million. Even before the coronavirus outbreak, all 3 reported lagging behind their peers in occupancy and revenue, struggles that the company's representatives blamed, in one way or another, on Trump's political rise. In Chicago, the city has begun a program to use some now empty hotel rooms to house people who have the virus but do not need hospital care, as well as people awaiting virus test results. That effort will be a lifeline for some hotels, with the city paying about $175 per night, the mayor's office said. The Trump Hotel in downtown Chicago is not part of the program at this time, a spokesman for Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who's a Democrat, said on Monday. By the way, there's your loophole, right? They'll say, can we really bar the president's business, whether it's his or run by his kids or whatever, from receiving market-level compensation if their rooms are essentially commandeered for housing coronavirus patients? And the answer is, yeah, you can if you want to, because emoluments clause. It's just, unfortunately, you own a hotel business, and that was a bad choice for you. You invested poorly for this unforeseen circumstance. We need the rooms, and we're taking them. Ordinarily, now, if you weren't president, we'd be paying you. But because you are president, we're not paying you. And that seems like it's unfair, except you're the president of the United States, and, it's unfair that a lot of people can't get the things they want done in this country, but you can. But hey, that's because you're president of the United States. There's some upside and there's some downside. I'm sorry, the emoluments clause is solid and says you can't be paid. Of course, they'll say it's not an emolument if I'm being paid for services rendered. That's been their argument all along. And so far, all the people who are responsible for enforcing the emoluments clause have said, that's either okay or I'm unwilling to do anything about it. The House of Representatives, by the way, with a Democratic majority, could, in fact, just declare that to be a prohibited emolument and pass a non-binding resolution rejecting the president's ability to claim and keep those emoluments. The way the emoluments clause is written, it says essentially without the express written permission, as they say on the football broadcasts and the sports broadcasts. Without the permission of Congress, he can't keep the emoluments. It's not clear whether courts would consider payments for hotel rooms to be emoluments. There's plenty of Trump judges out there available to save his bacon in that respect. They'll be wrong, but they'll vote to do that nonetheless. But it makes it a little bit harder if, you say, well, the Constitution's pretty clear. The only way he can keep emoluments is either, one, if they're just deemed not to be emoluments, or two, if the Congress says he can. And the Congress hasn't said he could, In fact, half the Congress has said he can't. That's going to be part of the evidence, that will sway things. But for some reason, the House has decided not to take that business up at any point, which seems weird to me. Back to the article, if Trump did loosen restrictions on movement in the name of restarting the U.S. economy, that would probably increase the number of people staying in hotels, said Freitag, the hotel industry analyst from STR. But Freitag said it would not be likely to change very much since fear of the virus would keep many people from traveling anyway. If people are on the roads and the virus continues to spread, you basically have a two-class society, right? That wasn't what came to mind immediately for me, but the people who had it and the people who don't have it, Freitag said. It's going to be hard to convince those who haven't had the virus to get back on the road, particularly if they're using those hotels to house people who do have the virus, I would think. There might be some protest. Actually, the Trump organization might protest against the idea of keeping people suspected of or actually confirmed to have the coronavirus in their properties. But I'm not sure. They might trade it for money, especially since they think the whole thing is a hoax anyway. All right, interesting story, and another one that an under-pursued avenue at dislodging the president from his perch. It's an impeachable offense. It should be pursued. But, whatever. Let's just not do it. How about that? All right, let's see. A couple other stories that ought to be put on the record. I'm going to have to scroll a little further down to see if I can find some of the things I keep saying. Damn it, I didn't bring that up. Yeah, here's a couple of interesting ones. Two short ones that I might be able to fit in. And I'll do this one before it becomes totally irrelevant. But I picked this one up on last Friday. A tweet from Maura Barrett, the campaign reporter for NBC News, who had this interesting tidbit about Mike Bloomberg. Do you remember him? So here's the news she was reporting. Mike Bloomberg, she said, is scrapping his plan to fund an independent expenditure campaign to support the Democratic nominee. Now, he's endorsed Joe Biden, and it looks for all the world like Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee. And you may remember that one of the sort of selling points of Bloomberg, I guess, in trying to establish his Democratic bona fides, right, is as a real Democrat, not a Republican anymore or independent or whatever he used to be, but now a Democrat. He said, I'm so committed to defeating Donald Trump that even if I'm not the nominee, I will fund, and I think he was talking about putting $1 billion into an independent expenditure campaign to defeat Trump. And he's now reassessed his position on that now that he's not the nominee. Also, one of the other things he did in staffing up, he wanted to attract the best people money could buy, and he literally did buy most of them. But he was able to do so by telling people, well, look, I may not be the nominee, but I'll tell you what, if you will leave wherever you are and come to New York and run my campaign, not only will I pay you extraordinarily well because I'm a billionaire, I will guarantee work for you through November. After all, I'm going to be doing this independent expenditure campaign, and we're going to need someone to work on that. So you'll have strategic work to do all the way through November. I guarantee I'll sign a contract with you. I'll pay you through November regardless, as part of compensation for your troubles, uprooting yourself and working for a long shot like me. Well, okay, that's been reassessed too. Maura Barrett's story is instead of all these things that he promised, he is laying off all of his campaign staff. Never mind what I told you I would pay you, and until when I told you I would pay you, and transferring instead of $1 billion to an independent expenditure. It has knocked that figure down slightly to $18 million, which is a fantastic amount of money. Don't get me wrong, but it's not $1 billion. And will it be an independent expenditure? No. Instead, he will transfer $18 million to the DNC, which no doubt needs it and would do well with it, but it's not what he said he was going to do. So there you have it. Luckily the news breaks now that he's out, so you don't have to be terribly disappointed at having been, let's say, fooled into making him the Democratic nominee and then finding out then. Although maybe he would have stuck with the plan if that were the case. Anyway, Doesn't reflect particularly well on Mike Bloomberg, but then again, at this point, now, given the outcome, who cares? But thought you might like to know what happened with all of that. All right. Here's an interesting story that, sort of has a coronavirus connection here. It's made explicit in the story here. This from Bloomberg. Oh, gosh, Bloomberg News. Well, I told you we were going to come back to Bloomberg no matter what. You try to say who cares about Bloomberg, and then you go right back to him. How do you like this headline? Locked down lawyers, we're all locked down, right, and working from home. Locked down lawyers are warned, I guess, that Alexa, is that the Google thing, Alexa? Yeah, that's what they call theirs. Alexa is hearing confidential calls. Damn it, I knew they were spying on me. Well, we didn't know you were going to be working from home all the time. It's not our fault. Crystal C., TSE, and Jonathan Browning are the reporters on the byline for this piece from March 20th in Bloomberg. Starts this way. Hey, Alexa, stop listening to my client's information. I don't have one, and I don't have Siri engaged either, so I don't have that to worry about. As law firms urge attorneys to work from home during the global pandemic, their employees' confidential phone calls with clients run the risk of being heard by Amazon.com Incorporated and Google. Mishan Dereya, LLP, the UK law firm that famously advised Princess Diana on her divorce, still dining out on that one, and also does corporate law, issued advice to staff to mute or shut off listening devices like Amazon's Alexa, I got it backwards, and Google's voice assistant when they talk about client matters at home, according to a partner at the firm. It suggested not to have any of the devices. Well, I would just make that the advice, but not to have any of the devices near their workspace at all, which is, of course, where people are putting them because that's where it's convenient. Mishan's warning covers any kind of visual or voice-enabled device like Amazon and Google's speakers, but video products such as Ring, which is also owned by Amazon, because everything is, and even baby monitors and closed-circuit TVs are also a concern, said Mishan Dereya partner Joe Hancock, who also heads the firm's cybersecurity efforts. Perhaps we're being slightly paranoid, but we need to have a lot of trust in these organizations and these devices, Hancock said. We'd rather not take those risks. We need to have a lot of trust in these organizations. And we don't. The firm worries about the devices being compromised, less so with name brand products like Alexa, but far more for cheap knockoff devices, he added. Like Wall Street, the frog plague is coming back here now. Like Wall Street, law firms are facing challenges to trying to impose secure work-from-home arrangements for certain job functions. Critical documents, including those that might be privileged, need to be secured. Meanwhile, in banking, some traders are being asked to work at alternative locations that banks keep on standby for disaster recovery instead of makeshift work-from-home stations to maintain confidentiality. Smart speakers, already notorious for activating an error, making unintended purchases, or sending snippets of audio to Amazon or Google, have become a new source of risk for businesses. As of last year, the U.S. installed base of smart speaker devices was 76 million units and growing, according to a Consumer Intelligence Research Partners report. Amazon and Google say their devices are designed to record and store audio only after they detect a word to wake them up. The companies say such instances are rare, but recent testing by Northeastern University and Imperial College London, Imperial is everywhere on this, found that the devices can activate inadvertently between 1.5 and 19 times a day. That's a large range. Tech companies have been under fire for compromising user privacy by having teams of human auditors listen to conversations without consent to improve their AI algorithms. Google has since said that users have to opt in to let the tech giant keep any voice recordings made by the device. Amazon now lets its users set up automatic deletion of recordings and opt out of manual review. The law firm's warning first surfaced on an Instagram account, Just the Quant. where people share their intel and struggles of working from home. Well, lots of problems with working from home for everybody. I actually heard from my brother, who's a doctor up in the Boston area, who was mentioning that in order to get telemedicine set up such that, in particular, elderly patients could do it, they usually have more secure platforms for telemedicine and don't allow you to conduct patient discussions and patient examinations and consultations over less than secure platforms. But in the interest of getting the medicine delivered in an epidemic, well, they're sort of waiving all these things, and the insurance companies are having to fly by the seat of their pants and waiving the usual requirements for protections of patient privacy. So there's going to be sort of a Wild West period here where a lot of information can escape into the wild. So be careful not only in washing your hands, but what your electronic security situation is as well. All right, time now for Justice Putnam to take over the mic with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with his usual collection of the stories we may have missed from around the country and around the world.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waltman.
I guess the biggest story jumping out at me that we haven't had a chance to touch on is tsunami warnings. Joan did make mention of those, issued after a magnitude 7.8 quake struck off Russia's Kuril Island. So we at least give you the epicenter on that one. And a watch for Hawaii. Stay tuned.